Late one September evening in 1913, a group of anglers from the Morganton Fishing Club sat along a riverbank in the North Carolina foothills, waiting for the light to fade. It did, and then it didn't. Above a low, unremarkable ridge called Brown Mountain, a reddish glow rose into the sky. It hung there, it pulsed, and then it vanished, as if someone had switched it off. They weren't the first to see it. They wouldn't be the last. Over a century later, people still drive to a scenic overlook called Wiseman's View, cut their headlights, and wait in the dark for the same thing, a light with no agreed-upon source, seen by thousands of witnesses, investigated twice by the United States government, and never fully put to re-saint. This is the story of the Brown Mountain Lights and of what happens when science declares a mystery solved and the mystery refuses to listen. Brown Mountain itself is almost aggressively unremarkable. It's a low ridge, barely a mile and a half long, topping out at just under 2,300 feet inside the Pisgah National Forest, straddling the line between Burke and Caldwell counties in western North Carolina. It isn't the tallest peak around. It isn't the most dramatic. From most angles, it barely qualifies as a landmark. What makes it strange is what happens in the valley below it. Brown Mountain sits above the Catawba River Gorge, a natural amphitheater carved by the Linville and Catawba rivers, prone to fog, temperature inversions, and the kind of atmospheric layering that can bend and magnify distant light sources in ways the human eye isn't built to interpret. Keep that detail in your back pocket. It matters later. For now, understand the geography this way. Brown Mountain isn't a mountain that produces its own light. It's a mountain that catches light from somewhere. And the argument about where has lasted well over 100 years. The earliest known print reference dates to September 1913 in the Charlotte Daily Observer, describing lights that appeared punctually around 7:30 and again around 10 p.m., a level of regularity that made them sound less like a ghost story and more like a schedule. But Brown Mountain had already accumulated a body of folklore by then. The most widely repeated legend claims the lights are the spirits of Cherokee women, mourning warriors lost in a great battle around the year 1200. It's a striking story, and researchers digging through the historical record have found no trace of it in print before 1938, which suggests it may be a 20th century invention retroactively dressed up as ancient tradition, rather than a documented piece of Cherokee oral history. We're flagging that distinction because it matters. Treating an invented legend as verified indigenous belief does a disservice to the actual history. The other major legend is a migratory one, a story type that folklorists have traced to multiple mountain locations across Appalachia, not just Brown Mountain. In this version, a plantation owner vanishes while hunting on the ridge, and the enslaved man sent to search for him never returns. Either the light is said to be his lantern, still searching. A third version swaps in a murdered mother named Belinda. Different names, same architecture, someone lost, someone searching. A light that never stops moving. None of these stories explain the lights, but they tell you something else, that whatever people were seeing, it was consistent enough and strange enough to demand a story. By 1913, the lights had stopped being a local curiosity and started being a political one. Newspaper coverage reached Congress, and Representative E.Y. Webb formally requested that the United States Geological Survey investigate. This wasn't a fringe request to a paranormal society. This was a sitting congressman asking a federal science agency to explain glowing lights on a mountain. The USGS sent geologist D.B. Sterrett that autumn. His method was straightforward: cross-reference known train schedules against reported sightings. His conclusion was equally straightforward. The lights were locomotive headlights, refracted and magnified by the valley's atmosphere as trains rounded distant curves. Case closed, according to the federal government. Except it wasn't, because 3 years later, nature ran an experiment nobody had asked for. In 1916, catastrophic flooding tore through western North Carolina and washed out the very rail line Sterrett had blamed. For a stretch of time, there were no trains running through the valley at all, and witnesses kept seeing the lights anyway. For the people who'd never fully accepted the train explanation, this was vindication. If the trains were gone and the lights weren't, then the government's tidy 1,913 answer couldn't be the whole story. The counter-argument that automobile headlights, brush fires, and other sources had already begun filling the gap as the region modernized got less attention than the dramatic coincidence. That's often how these stories work. the explanation that survives in public memory isn't always the most complete one. It's the one with the better plot twice straight. Public pressure built for years afterward, until two U.S. Senators, Furnifold Simmons and Lee Overman, personally pushed the Geological Survey for a second, more rigorous investigation. That investigation arrived in 1922, and it remains the most thorough scientific study Brown Mountain has ever received. USGS geologist George Mansfield spent 2 full weeks in the field, observing from multiple vantage points across 7 separate evenings, 4 of them past midnight. He wasn't guessing, he was working. Mansfield used a mapping telescope called an alidade to precisely triangulate the direction of each light he observed. He ran dip needle tests to rule out unusual magnetic activity in the rock. He cross-checked his sightings against train schedules and known roads. Across his observation period, he logged 23 distinct lights, and his data attributed roughly 47% to automobile headlights, 33% to locomotives, and the remaining fifth to stationary sources like campfires and brush fires, all of it amplified by the same atmospheric refraction we mentioned back in Scene 2, the valley's fog and temperature layers acting almost like a lens. Mansfield's official report to the press listed 11 total proposed explanations that had circulated over the years, everything from will-o'-the-wisps to phosphorescence to a form of atmospheric electricity. Researchers were calling Andy's Light after similar reports from South America. His own conclusion favored the mundane, ordinary light sources, extraordinarily displayed by the geography itself. By any reasonable scientific standard, Brown Mountain had been explained. Twice. And yet, people kept watching, people kept seeing something, and decades later, science kept showing up to check again. In 1977, researchers from Oak Ridge National Laboratory set up their own arc light and observed it from Brown Mountain's traditional viewing points, successfully reproducing an effect consistent with the historical sightings, reinforcing the refraction theory using real experimental data rather than just testimony. In 2014, skeptical investigator Joe Nickel conducted his own field study and reported much the same conclusion: misidentified vehicle lights, distant radio towers, and, in some accounts, even fireflies mistaken for something more. So here's the strange part. This isn't a mystery where science failed to find an answer. It's a mystery where science found an answer several times, with actual data, and the culture around it simply declined to let it go. The lights became less about physics and more about identity, a piece of regional folklore, a tourist draw for Burke County, a bluegrass song, an X-Files episode, a fixture of Appalachian storytelling passed down at overlooks and campfires long after the alidade telescopes went back in their cases. Maybe that's the real story here, not an unsolved mystery, but an unsatisfying one. A federal geologist can hand you a percentage breakdown of headlights and brush fires, and it still won't feel like enough, because the explanation arrived in a government circular, and the legend arrived at a campfire, and only one of those knows how to make you feel something. People still drive out to Wiseman's View at dusk. They still cut their headlights and wait, not because the science is wrong, but because knowing what a thing probably is has never stopped anyone from wanting to see it for themselves. And if you're the kind of person drawn to places where the official answer and the local legend never quite made peace, there's another North Carolina mountain with a very different story. If you like these kind of stories, please like and subscribe to this channel for more interesting episodes. That's next.